So finally, we saw the third round of exchange of Palestinian hostages with those Israelis and Thai nationals held by Palestinian groups earlier today. After three Israelis and five Thai nationals were released, Israel was expected to honor its commitment as part of the ceasefire deal and release 110 Palestinian hostages who were held in Israeli concentration camps for several years. They included 30 Palestinian women and children. 30 Palestinian women and children. Chances are you wouldn't have heard of this cruel fact on Western propaganda outlets, but this remains the fact. Immediately after Palestinian groups honored their commitment, war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu shockingly announced that he had told his associates to not release Palestinians until he was able to arm twist Hamas fighters and have his say in the next stages of the war. Apparently, his ego was hurt by a large crowd that had gathered in Khan Yunus during the release of one Israeli hostage. The official Twitter handle of terrorist Netanyahu wrote, and I quote, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, together with Defense Minister Israel Katz, has ordered that the release of the terrorists slated to be released today be delayed until the safe exit of our hostages in the next phase is assured. Israel demands that the mediators see to this. End quote. Joining him to push the Zionist propaganda was this shameless British MP Suella Braverman. Can you see the irony here? A genocidal supporter, and I'm being very polite here as I have better terminologies to describe her shamelessness, is lecturing others on civility. She shared this video. This raised huge questions about the validity of the ongoing ceasefire. Those who know war criminal Netanyahu had genuine fears about an imminent collapse of the ongoing ceasefire. You have to understand that war criminal Netanyahu never wanted this ceasefire to take place in the first instance. The continuation of Israeli terrorism suits his political survival and ability to remain in power. Had it not been for some tough talking by Donald Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, Netanyahu wouldn't have agreed to end the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. That's the truth. I had made a video on this. You can watch here. Witkoff, who entered Gaza earlier this week as part of an inspection team, also met the family members of some Israeli hostages. They shared their concern over the fragile nature of the ceasefire, given Netanyahu's unpredictable behavior and continuing shenanigans. By that, I mean his latest statement, to which Witkoff reportedly assured them in no uncertain terms that he had the mandate from Donald Trump to ensure that all phases of the ceasefire would be honored, including by this bloodthirsty terrorist Netanyahu. As soon as I heard of this development, I knew Netanyahu's theatrics will not last, and he would have no option but to release 110 Palestinians as part of the agreement of the ceasefire. I know he's desperate to find any excuse to break the deal and resume his barbarism. He may have succeeded had genocidal Joe Biden been in power, but thankfully, this Witkoff guy is holding tight up until now. Israelis have long lived with a sense of entitlement that they can get away by doing anything. Why wouldn't they? After all, nothing has happened to Netanyahu and his other terrorist colleagues, even after they presided over the genocide of more than 200,000 Palestinians in Gaza and the destruction of whole of Gaza. Even Witkoff, a real estate magnate, thinks that it will take at least 10 to 15 years to rebuild Gaza. And yet, Netanyahu's disgraced UN representative Danny Danon had the audacity to proudly announce that the UN agency UNRWA, which serves as the lifeline for 6 million displaced Palestinians in Gaza, the occupied West Bank, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, will cease to function from those territories occupied by Israel.
Good morning. I hereby inform the United Nations and the Security Council that the legislation concerning UNRWA's activities in Israel will officially come into force in 48 hours on January 30. In accordance with applicable Israeli law and following the termination of the provisional agreement, UNRWA must cease its operations and evacuate all premises it operates in Jerusalem, including the properties located in Ma'alot Dafna and Kfar Akeb. The legislation forbids UNRWA from operating within the sovereign territory of the State of Israel and forbids any contact between Israeli officials and UNRWA. Furthermore, UNRWA will be prohibited from maintaining any representative, office, service, or activity within our territory. Israel will terminate all collaboration, communication, and contact with UNRWA or anyone acting on its behalf. This decision was not made lightly, nor was it made quickly. It was not a political decision, it was simply a necessary one. It follows decades of betrayal by an agency that has placed political agendas, neglect, and cover-ups over humanitarian principles. This decision reflects years of efforts to address the grave accusations raised against UNRWA.
You'd have expected an outrage from around the world. We are talking about a tiny settler colony built on stolen land belonging to Palestinians, banning a UN agency. UN agency! But there was a deafening silence in the Western world over this utterly illegal action by the Israeli regime. The US is silent. The UK, which is run by a so-called human rights lawyer, Keir Starmer, is silent. And the EU is silent. Their collective silence tells you everything about these hypocrites' so-called claims on human rights and the application of international laws. In contrast, the Palestinian ambassador was once again in tears as he shared his people's agony with the Security Council this week.
Yesterday, in 2 hours, Mr. President, 200,000 Palestinians marched walking from the south to the north. Old men and women holding a tired cane, small children who have just recently learned to walk, families carrying whatever they can of what remains of who they are, men and women, exhausted, bereaved, sometimes injured, finding the energy to take one step after another to reverse this latest forcible displacement, survivors of a genocide fighting against ethnic cleansing. They know they are returning to find ruins, that their homes have been destroyed, their neighborhoods have been obliterated, their schools and hospitals have been bombed. They know that all the requirements of life have been deliberately targeted, and yet, still, they went back. That image tells you all you need to know about the Palestinian people. This is who we are. Their tragedy, their pain and agony, all that they have endured, and the wish of Israel to humiliate them and to make them suffer, even as refugees returning to destroyed refugee camps, not to their villages and towns, but also this image shows their resilience, their steadfastness, their inability to surrender, and just how much they belong to this land, and this land belongs to them.
I'm sure he knows that his tears will have zero effect on these heartless people, particularly those who themselves have been settlers historically, and you know who I'm referring to. We all share the Palestinian ambassador's feelings. We all feel for Palestinians and their suffering. As I said before, the grace and patience with which these Palestinians have withstood Israeli barbarism have inspired me to be a better human being. I pray that one day I can travel to the independent state of Palestine and spend time with these incredibly brave people. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your support of this platform and our journalism on buymeacoffee.com and Patreon. If you do think that our journalism is worth supporting, then you too should consider becoming part of it. The details are there in the description of this video. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so because that's one of the many ways you can support independent journalism. God bless you all.